So light source coming in, hitting the cube. Notice there's not a smooth transition, right? It's these hard edges because they're different planes of a cube. The light acts a little bit different. So light source coming in from the left. The highlight is the whole plane of the cube. And you can observe this if you set up a light source and a box. Your highlight might not always light the entire plane. It probably will, but depending on how big your cube is and how it's being lit, you might get a little bit of tone on your lit plane of your cube. The core shadow of the cube is going to be on the plane that's furthest, that's turning away from the light source, right? So if the highlight's hitting here on the cube, this corner of the cube isn't going to get any light. And that's our core shadow, the darkest part. The cast shadow is here on this surface. Again, notice the correlation to the angle of the cast shadow and the angle of the light source. So the light source is coming in from the top left. We can follow it down from the edges, from the corners of the cube, right? So hitting the cube, we follow that all the way down. Once it hits the surface, that's going to give us the shape of our cast shadow. And this one here is defined by this corner, right? And it continues to the backside of this cube. It would hit about here, right, or wherever this back corner is exactly. But we don't need to know, doesn't matter. And then reflected light, the light that bounces off the surface back onto the cube, and it slides, makes a nice gradation into our core shadow here. Light logic of a cone. I guess all these light sources are coming from the left, so light source coming in from the left. We have our whole light area here. A little bit of a gradation here into our core shadow, the darkest part. Keeps turning, lightens up again when we get into our reflected light over here. And then our cast shadow here on the surface. If we follow the angle of the light source from the top of the cone to the surface, that's how we can find the end of our cast shadow. The shape of the cast shadow is going to follow the shape of the object. So the base of this cone is a circle, so in perspective it's an ellipse, right? So the shape of the cast shadow here is going to follow that. You can observe all this. You can set up a cone, put a light on it, see what it looks like. A pyramid, kind of similar to a cone, but squared off, right? So we've got planes instead of a rounded surface. So the light's coming in, hitting this, lighting up this entire plane. Again, we talked about the outlines versus a shift in tone on the edges. This is a little bit heavy of an outline here on the pyramid, but maybe it's a little bit raised on that surface. The way it's really defined is the shift in tone, right? So the highlight on this plane, and then a darker background here on this front surface. We've got highlight, core shadow on the corner that's turning away from the highlight here. Shifts, the light shifts here, gradiates down a little bit lighter on this edge because we're getting reflected light coming in. And the cast shadow here goes off the page, right, because the light source is coming in. If we follow that, the angle of the light to the shape of our pyramid, the top of the pyramid, it would just go off the page, right? So it didn't get squeezed in, it's fine. We just let it run off the page. In this drawing, the cast shadow is not fully on the surface, right? Because these objects are touching. So the cast shadow is on the table. And then for the cylinder, it's also on the wall. In the sphere, it's on the wall, right? Because it's butted up against the wall. And it's also on the cylinder, right? So the cast shadow of this sphere is falling onto the cylinder and onto the table. There's a shift in the shape because it's these objects are butted up against a table, right? So we can see the corner of the surface here, defined by a shift in tone.